in terms of the production cycle of units, because he has a larger money inflow, but not if the yellow survey player is able to lock down the mining activity of the green survey player at the waterside expansion there. But the green survey player is very smartly moving his MiG fighters into the waterside expansion. They're looking to intercept the twin blades, and the twin blades has been repelled away, but they are moving towards the center of the map, which the yellow survey player is going to go through to give a epic push into his opponent's main base here. His opponent does not have a larger army. I would say the army count for both at this particular point of the game is pretty even here, and now that the one advantage that the yellow survey player does have, though, is his infantry support, so he is going to use it quite wisely, I would assume. But one roar from the bear can ruin the day for him, or that's the curse of using infantry as your support. But now with two twin blades joining the fight, I think the yellow survey player will be able to take out the ground army from the green survey player pretty handily, and it's going to be happily harassing the main base of the green Soviet player here. Now the reinforcement of the yellow Soviet player is coming from the main base, the war factory there. I can see 2 bullfrogs just for anti-air purposes, now that he knows that his opponent's only viable way of his opponents of coming back to this game is to do some heavy damage to his ground sorry, a bit of glitch in my speech there. Ground army there to try to spring him ahead and give him a little bit of time to re-micro up his army, and we are going to not see that, it seems, because we do have 2 bullfrogs for anti-air, which is pretty solid in terms of anti-air. Bullfrogs do have these very, very nasty flank cannons which can shoot rapidly into air units and make the day of the air units very, very unpleasant. And we are going to see 2 hammer tanks just shooting away at the war factory here. Has successfully destroyed one of the barracks, so there will be no more infantry coming out from our green Soviet player here, and this hammer tank coming out of the war factory here is going to be instantly shot to pieces by the yellow Soviet player there, and 2 twin blades coming in trying to save the day, but that is not going to happen. Oh, but the third twin blade might be able to do it now that the yellow Soviet player does only have 2 bullfrogs as the anti-air, but never mind, he does have the flank troopers, so with the flank trooper support he was able to take out the 3 twin blade engagement from his opponents here, and he has destroyed one of the miners at his opponent's main base, so now it's effectively 4 refinery against 4 refinery, and now the yellow Soviet player does have a very large army at his opponent's main base, just shooting away at the production structure here. If it is taken out, it would hinder the green Soviet player's production very, very severely. Now that his MCV is in the water, so he cannot produce any sort of war factory outside of that, but he can technically completely bypass that by just producing water units and use dreadnoughts and so forth to do a comeback, now that his opponent's army is very, very ground heavy, and he is thinking about that, since he does still have 3 refinery if his opponent does take out the main base, which is looking really likely now. One of the badges has taken out 3 of the flank troopers there holding their mines, trying to take out a miner all on their own, and the yellow Soviet player is smelling blood. He is keeping on the production of anti-air units and war factory units, I would say, out of the war factory, of course, because they are war factory units. You can only produce war factory units out of war factory if you are a Soviet player. In fact, any factioned war factory units can only be produced out of war factories. And we are going to see a secret protocol being utilized by our green Soviet player, and he has tagged 4 of the infantry there just to recuperate some of the army, and in the desolator airstrike taking out almost all the infantry supports save 1 flank trooper for the yellow Soviet player there. And mysteriously the yellow Soviet player is looking to place the whole of his tank army inside of the green asset there. Oh, I see. He is distracted by the air harassment by the green Soviet player at his main base there, so he was not looking. A large number of his tanks was brought down to 0 and 0 yellow, and 4 of them are even in a deep red, but he does still have a very large number. He is now going to push to the 2 o'clock expansion of his opponents. They're looking to take out his opponent's economy even more, but we are seeing one Tesla coil there, which can be quite nasty, since now that the tank army for the yellow Soviet player is basically on very low HP, so they can be taken out quite nicely by the Tesla coil here, even with the very slow firing rate for the Tesla coil. And the green Soviet player is producing MiG fighters out of his airfield there, now that he does recognize that in this stage of the game the air superiority is very important. If he can just grab the air superiority and completely take over the air from his opponent's grasp, he will stand a really good chance of coming back to this game. And indeed he is doing some form of air harassment. He is using a secondary ability of the twin blades here, which we don't nearly see enough. For the Soviet faction here, he has grabbed up one of his Stingray here, looking to drop inside his opponent's main base, doing some pretty severe harassment there. Keep in mind, Stingrays are very effective against a small number of infantry and structures. They are not so effective against tank, but against some light armored mech units, they are very effective. How many times have I used the word effective? Which, well, I don't really care. So we are going to see a air engagement is going to swing towards the yellow Soviet's favor. He has taken out I would assume, all the MiG fighters from the green Soviet player here, and retaining all of his MiG fighters as well, and now he's going to be happily shooting away at the structures here using his hammer tanks just to look to regain their HP just a little bit. And he's not even using a twin blade. Perhaps he's considering the HP of his opponent's structure as a resource, so he doesn't want to waste a resource to over-attacking his opponent's structures, and he's going to use the leecher bin from the hammer tanks. They're leeching away at the walls, regaining their HP there, but he is going to have to be careful, since his opponents now does have a bullfrog really up and close and personal with the twin blades there, and shooting down one of the MiG fighters there just to take out his opponent's air dominance just a little bit. And we are going to see a pretty peculiar engagement here, I would say, because one of the Stingrays is happily shooting away at the refinery here. The yellow Soviet player does recognize that this refinery is unsalvageable and is not going to be bothered to do any form of removal of this Stingray here, and instead he is going to move one of his twin blades in counter-attack into his opponent's water expansion here, just stopping the mining activity of one of the 2 remaining refinery at the moment for his opponent, and severely hindering his economy. And we can see the production rate from this naval yard is not particularly fast, simply due to the fact that one of his refineries out of the 2 has stopped mining. And I would say at this point of the game the yellow Soviet player does have a commanding lead, but he does not have the air superiority, and indeed he's not paying attention to the twin blade harassment onto his army by the green Soviet player. The green Soviet player does have his MCV at 2 o'clock of the map. Is going to re-establish his 3rd refinery at the 2 o'clock of the map, and he's going to make this place a goddamn stronghold to bring nightmare to his opponents and look to engage his opponents in a more favorable angle, so that he can take out his opponent's army with a much smaller force. And we are going to see one bullfrog being produced out of the naval yard here, taking out of the very pesky twin blade from the yellow Soviet player there, resuming the mining of the 12 o'clock water side expansion for the green Soviet player. But we are going to see our yellow Soviet player very smartly producing out a bullfrog out of his war factory here, now that he does recognize that air dominance at this point of the game is very crucial. And he has even expanded to his opponent's previous main base location here and taking 2 of the main ore refineries, ore mines for himself. And now that is effectively 4 refinery against 3. He does have a larger ground army count, I would say, although the army composition is not exactly ideal, and he is ahead economically, so the only job that he needs to do now really is to be annoying to his opponent's mineral line and stop the unit production activity as soon as possible, so that his opponents would have a ton of money, but with no means of spending it effectively to be against this ground army here. But since his opponents does have this nice little waterside expansion, what's wrong with my speech? Waterside expansion here, the yellow Soviet player is going to have to produce some form of naval force, or indeed a large enough air force to make an effective push and end the game. But if we can take out the MCV here and the Green Soviet player does not decide to erect up a crusher crane, which is looking fairly unlikely, because now that the yellow Soviet player does have his own navy up, he has 2 Akula subs moving to the 12 o'clock expansion, looking to deliver a crushing blow to his opponent's mineral line here. And indeed his opponents are very smartly moving his miners away, just avoiding being taken out by the Akulas up there. The torpedoes are very effective against any sort of vehicles in the water, I would say. And if your miner is taken out, you have to spend a considerable amount of resource to rebuild them, and that is a expend our Green Soviet player at this point of the game certainly don't want to take. But I don't think it doesn't matter though, because now that the yellow Soviet player does have a larger air force, his twin blade count is looking 6. 6 twin blades can basically one-shot a bullfrog here, so even that form of anti-air and, well, ground to surface to air forces is not so effective against this number of twin blades. Not mentioning the fact that the yellow Soviet player does have his entire tank army sitting right in front of the 2 o'clock expansion, which I might add is where the MCB for the Green Soviet player is, and is happily shooting away at the refinery here. Perhaps, I see why he's letting his tank sitting there doing nothing, because his main base is being harassed, and his super reactor has been taken out or sold. But I don't think it doesn't matter now that the Green Soviet player is going to GG out of this game, selling all his structures. And GG, ladies and gentlemen. My name has been KT0, and I will see you next time.